Hi everyone, it's Alex, and I'm going to walk you through my solution to day one of admin of code in Forth. So part one of day one gives you a list of lines of input, and you're supposed to find the first and last number of that line of input, and then create a 2-digit number, sum all the 2-digit numbers, and that's your answer. So part two has, once you've solved part one, you update to include both numbers and also spelled out digits. So here's my solution. So I live streamed the solution and then I edited it and cleaned it up just a little bit. So I'll walk you through how I approached the problem and then how I cleaned it up to come up with a little bit of a better solution. So let's start at the innermost part of the problem and then kind of work out. So for part one, the first thing that we need is we need this getDigit function. So what this does is it takes an address, so a pointer to a character in a string, and then it returns the digit at that character. And so the way that it does this is we get the character at the address, we duplicate it, and then we check if it is between 0 and 9, if it's a numeric digit. If it is, subtract 48. So subtracting 48 is the way that you convert a ASCII value to its corresponding numeric digit. Otherwise, return 0. So if address is not a valid digit, we just return 0. So once we have the getDigit function, what we want to do is we want to get the first and last digit. So for the first digit, we use this word R4, which is a word in Dusk OS that allows us to iterate over a string. And so the first thing to understand is that there's two ways of representing a string in Forth, specifically in Dusk OS. One is a counted string, and one is a range, a string range. There's different words for both of these concepts. A counted string is a string where the first byte is the length of the string. So the first byte, so you have a string hello, you have a byte that is just the number 5 for 5 characters, and then you have the 5 subsequent bytes. The other way of representing a string is through an address and a range. And so the address is the first character in the string, and then you have an unsigned integer which represents the length of that string. So the way that we convert between these strings is with the character at plus word. So R4 is an iterator that iterates across each character in a string once it's in its range form, address and length. So basically we iterate over all of the characters. We call getDigit. We then duplicate it if it's non-zero, and it also, if it's non-zero, then we break. So essentially what this word does is it takes a string and it iterates from the beginning of the string to the end of the string until it finds a numeric character, and then it returns that character, or it pushes that character to the stack. The last word is a reverse iterator. So I spent a bit of time trying to see how to. There's no reverse iterator or no easy way that I could figure out to make R4, the string iterator, go in reverse. And so I just used a for loop in order to iterate backwards across a string using local variables here. And so we have the word first, which gets the first number in the string. We have the word last, which gets the last number in the string. And then calibration does a little bit of stack manipulation here to multiply the first times 10 and then and then get the last value, and then add the last value. So this is the calibration number for a line of input. It gets the first number, it gets the last number, it turns that into a 2-digit number, and then pushes the result to the stack. So that's essentially how I solved part 1. The way that I solved part 2 is, you notice here that getDigit here has an underscore, and we actually have an alias of getDigit. There's many ways I could have done this, but what I decided to do was use this word which gets gets a digit. So you point at an address, and then it will look at that address and then try and find a digit. And that could be either a string or an integer. And in part 1, it is just an integer, and in part 2, it's a string, or it's an integer or a string. And what we do is, so we don't have to read the file twice, we don't have to open it and iterate over it twice. We actually re-alias between loops. So we read a line of code, we run calibration with getDigit being the part 1 getDigit, then we add that to total A. We then re-alias getDigit to be getDigit with text, and then we run, we add that to total B, and then we print the result. Part 2 is part 1 plus some additional work. And that additional work here is what I call word num, and some of these could be better worded. But what this does is it takes that address and then determines whether that address is the start of a string that is in this list. And so if it is, it returns the index of that string. Given that there's a variable length string, it becomes slightly more complicated in that we have to iterate from the numbers 3 to 5. And so basically what we do is we look at the beginning of this, we look at the address, we look 3, 4, and 5 characters ahead, and then we see if any of those strings are in this list. If so, we return the index, otherwise we return 0. And so getDigit with text uses that logic, or it uses the getDigit logic, and iterates over the lines of input. And then finally we print total A, total B, and that's the solution to day 1 in Forth. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe if you want more Advent of Code Forth content.